the first time since the Taliban seized power in Afghanistan, their acting foreign minister Amir Muttaqi arrived in Delhi. A visit billed as historic yet steeped in controversy. India, a country that once invested billions in the Afghan Republic, now finds itself at a crossroads. Engaging a regime that bars women from education, silences dissent, and even temporarily or maybe permanently in their own country, bars female journalists from its press conferences in India and in Kabul. This is not diplomacy as usual. This is realpolitik with ethical dilemmas. India is opening its doors to a government that has pledged peace with its neighbors, yet faces deep internal fissures and factionalism. A government whose historic ties with Pakistan complicate every strategic calculation. And yet, for New Delhi, dialogue is not a choice anymore. It is a necessity. But as India steps into the corridors of Taliban power, one question remains. Is New Delhi shaping Afghanistan's future, or is it being shaped by a regime whose values challenge its very own? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. India has opened a cautious new chapter in its Afghanistan policy. For the first time since the Taliban returned to power in 2021, the group's acting foreign minister, Amir Muttaqi, arrived in Delhi for a week-long visit, a ministerial-level engagement that marks a historic shift, and yet one fraught with questions, contradictions, and risks. New Delhi's engagement with the Taliban is not about recognition, it is about pragmatism. India faces a complex neighborhood where Pakistan's influence, China's economic expansion, and the resurgence of terror networks in Afghanistan demand a recalibration of policy. In this context, dialogue with Kabul's rulers is no longer optional, it is imperative. But the timing and the optics are delicate. For years, India's support was with the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, investing nearly $3 billion in reconstruction, education, and infrastructure. Now, India finds itself meeting the very group that imposed sweeping restrictions on women, silenced dissent, and barred female journalists, including me, from a press conference in New Delhi itself. The incident was telling. When journalists like me and many others asked and sought to be a part of that press conference, the first press conference being held by the acting foreign minister, we were refused entry. We tried to cover it, we wanted to be part of it, but we weren't invited. But then, after much uproar, there was a change in stance, and we were allowed in. Taliban officials described the exclusion as a technical issue, or also said it was on short notice and that technical issues were being discussed. That really didn't cut it for us. We were there, we protested, and we showed them that in India, women are part of every fraternity and cannot be excluded. The casualness of the explanation, however, underscored a larger tension. How does India engage pragmatically with a regime whose policies are fundamentally at odds with its own democratic and pluralist values?
شرکت کو د نورو لپاره تصمیم نه ونیولای د باندې داسې ښکاره شوله که ځینې خبرنګاران چې مناسب وي په حقیقت کې یو مشخص لیست لیږل سوی و د هغه له مخې څو کسان راغلي وو نوره په دې کې کومه خاص خبره او ستونزه نه وه.
Yet for Indian policymakers, pragmatism prevails. Afghanistan is strategically central, rich in natural resources, and a key conduit for regional trade. The rise of ISIS Khorasan province, that is ISIS-K, the persistent threat of terror groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Afghanistan's proximity to Pakistan make diplomatic engagement unavoidable. In short, India has little choice if it wants to protect its strategic interests. Also, remember, there are historical ties between these two countries that cannot be ignored.
Well, I certainly think opportunities were missed both by the Ministry of External Affairs and the Indian government, as well as by the Taliban regime that has come to India with the idea that they are strengthening cooperation. To have come over here and then to have tried to segregate men and women or to discriminate and only bring men defeats the purpose of what they're trying to say in terms of strengthening cooperation and having some kind of a common platform between them. I think it's important that we saw with the turnaround within 48 hours, because what it shows is that when the Indian media shows solidarity together, and I think this is about male journalists, women journalists, they both said this is wrong. We were hoping the MEA would also say this is wrong.
Pakistan, once the Taliban's closest ally, is now embroiled in fierce clashes with Afghan forces along the 2,600-kilometer Durand Line. Long-standing alliances have fractured, illustrating the fragility of regional loyalties. For India, this presents both an opportunity and a risk. But during his Delhi visit, Muttaqi repeated a line he has consistently used on regional tours. We have historical ties with Pakistan, and this conflict has to be resolved through dialogue and diplomacy. A statement that is at once reassuring and unsettling. While it signals willingness for diplomacy, it also highlights the deep entanglement of Afghanistan's politics with Islamabad, or to be particular, Rawalpindi, a country India has long viewed as a security threat. The Taliban may now be more independent of Pakistan's influence, yet the historical alignment and ongoing ties remain a factor in every calculation. New Delhi's calculus is clear. By engaging the Taliban, India maintains access to Afghan policymakers, safeguards its regional footprint, and secures its investments and connectivity projects. Indian officials argue that without dialogue, India risks being entirely cut out of Afghanistan's future political and economic framework.
Led everyone to believe that Afghanistan under the Taliban would be a Pak proxy, but 4 years down the line, everybody's fears have been completely unfounded. Actually, this present scenario of the Afghanistan and Pakistan fighting each other offers India a great chance of not only building bridges with the Taliban regime in Kabul, but also to counter Pakistan's so-called strategy of strategic depth inside Afghanistan. And as the old saying goes, your enemy's enemy is possibly your best friend, and that seems to have unfolded in the case of India and Afghanistan as well.
But the engagement comes with ethical questions. How does India reconcile its democratic ideals with a regime that systematically excludes women from education, employment, and public life? A regime that didn't rescue women during a devastating earthquake in September just because of their no-skin contact with unrelated females. A regime that destroyed the oldest Buddha statues in their country. How can we forget the 2008 Indian embassy attack that killed 59 people, including 4 Indian officials? Yet, there is nuance. India's approach is neither full recognition nor endorsement. It is conditional and cautious. Even though it has not formally recognized the Taliban regime, New Delhi will reopen its embassy in Kabul. Humanitarian assistance, capacity building, and dialogue on counterterrorism allow New Delhi to influence the Taliban's decisions, while leaving room to protest policies that violate basic human rights. During his visit, Muttaqi met External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, signaling that India is treating this as a high-level strategic engagement. He also visited Darul Uloom Deoband and Afghan community representatives, a blend of diplomacy, culture, and soft outreach. The irony, however, is unmistakable. This very Deoband had once been criticized by a leader from the ruling dispensation, Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath, who in 2021 accused its clerics of supporting the Taliban's return to power in Kabul. His fiery speech at the State Assembly had gone viral then, but today, the same institution has quietly become part of India's outreach to the Taliban. And let's just put it bluntly, the red carpet was rolled out.
अध्यक्ष जी तालिबान का समर्थन कर रहे हैं कुछ लोग, महिलाओं के साथ क्या क्रूरता बरती जा रही है वहां पर, बच्चों के साथ क्या क्रूरता बरती जा रही है अफगानिस्तान में, लेकिन कुछ लोग बेशर्मी के साथ तालिबान का समर्थन किए जा रहे हैं, तालिबानीकरण करना चाहते हैं। ये सभी के चेहरे एक्सपोज किए जाने चाहिए समाज के सामने।
But while India seeks stability, the Taliban faces its own internal challenges. Fissures between the Quetta and Kandahar Shuras, pro- and anti-Pakistan factions, and divisions among regional commanders shape their decision-making. The Taliban's independence from Pakistan is growing, yet Pakistan's historical support and lingering influence cannot be ignored. Recent clashes along the Durand Line illustrates this precariousness. Pakistan's bombing of Afghan border province last December underscores the volatility of the relationship. For India, the takeaway is twofold. The Taliban may now be autonomous, but regional instability could spill over into Indian strategic concerns, particularly along trade corridors and the Chabahar Afghan route. Taliban officials insist Afghanistan will not serve as a launchpad for attacks against neighbors. They've pledged to prevent Afghan territory from being used by terrorist groups targeting India. Yet intelligence reports indicate continuing links between Pakistan-based terror outfits and ISIS-K, a reminder that pledges are only as strong as enforcement. New Delhi's engagement is therefore a balancing act. It seeks to protect its investments, encourage Afghanistan's economic development, and forestall militant threats, all while avoiding the appearance of legitimizing regressive Taliban policies. It is a careful exercise in realpolitik, informed by both opportunity and caution. Critics, however, warn that India is gambling with its principles, engaging a regime that restricts women's rights, silences the media, and enforces harsh governance that could erode India's moral standing on the world stage. Yet, as diplomats argue, isolation could leave India sidelined in a country whose geography, resources, and strategic position are too important to ignore. What was important during this visit was for New Delhi to stand firm on some of its policies and morals. For example, ensuring that Indian women journalists were allowed for that first press conference being held by Muttaqi. Although it was the Afghan embassy and Afghan soil, it was in India, and India should have ensured that these bad optics do not play out, that really fizzle out what strategic gains they intended or wished to achieve. India's bets are calculated but risky. By opening channels with the Taliban, New Delhi protects its southern and Central Asian interests, maintains influence over trade and connectivity, and counters growing Chinese presence. Yet, it does so amid ethical, domestic, and international scrutiny. And in this case, it was important that New Delhi send out a strong message to the Taliban, not the other way around, where we journalists had to stand up for our rights. But there is another thing over here. The engagement with the Taliban also sends a message to Pakistan. India's presence in Kabul, participation in regional forums, and dialogue with the Taliban assert that New Delhi will remain a key player in Afghanistan, even as Islamabad's influence wanes. For Pakistan, once the architect of Taliban power, this represents a subtle yet symbolic shift in regional balance. And yet, uncertainty abounds. The Taliban's domestic governance remains opaque. Women remain excluded from education and the workforce. Factionalism within the group could derail India's strategic calculations. The ethical and security dilemmas inherent in engagement are as real as the pragmatic benefits. For India, the path forward is a delicate one. It must navigate Taliban sensitivities, monitor Pakistan-Afghanistan tensions, safeguard trade and transit corridors, and ensure counter-terrorism cooperation, all without compromising its core values. Diplomatic engagement is the only viable option, but it is a tightrope walk.
Well, the Taliban have no great admirers in India. That much is very clear, given their very poor track record of the last couple of years, especially when it comes to targeting women, keeping women out of school and college education, denying them that, and the kind of restrictions that have been imposed on women. And India, for all its gender progressive policies, does not encourage or indeed condone such behavior on the part of the Taliban. So what's driving India's great relationship with Afghanistan under the Taliban? It has to do with real politics.
The Taliban's visit is historic, but history alone does not guarantee clarity. As India engages, it does so with eyes wide open, aware of the risks, conscious of its principles, and focused on strategic imperatives. The question is not whether India can engage. It must, but whether it can do so without compromising its values, security, and long-term interests. The engagement underscores a fundamental reality. In geopolitics, choices are rarely clean or comfortable. India must balance pragmatism against principle, opportunity against risk. The Taliban visit is both a chance and a test of India's ability to influence Afghanistan while safeguarding its values. In this region, history, geography, and ideology intertwine. India's outreach to the Taliban reflects not optimism but necessity. Yet necessity is not without consequences. How New Delhi navigates this engagement will shape not only Afghanistan's future but the balance of power in South Asia. India has opened the door to the Taliban. It is a calculated bet, a gamble on influence, security, and regional stability. But history reminds us engagement with volatile actors is never without risk. For India, the challenge is clear: engage, influence, and protect, without losing sight of the values that define the nation. As Muttaqi's visit unfolds, India watches, measures, and acts. Every handshake, every meeting, every statement carries weight. In a neighborhood defined by shifting alliances, fragile borders, and long shadows of history, India's decisions today will echo for years to come. The Taliban may be at India's doorstep, but it is India that must determine the terms of engagement. Pragmatism must meet principle. Strategy must meet ethics. And in a region where instability is the norm, foresight will determine whether this historic visit becomes a moment of influence or a miscalculated risk. Thank you for watching Statecraft.